the legendary Black Blades, and their maker a dwarvish name. His war of vengeance, many an orc was slain, but the mountain metropolis was under attack, betrayal, and a cunning orc raid. His stronghold was sacked, its location lost in the trackless wilderness. His name, Dugadin the Black. Hello everyone, my name is ET and this is D&D with ET. Today I want to walk you through the dungeon, the Forge of Fury. I've ran this dungeon about 4 times and I love it so much because the opening chase scene is like a roller coaster. These 2 puny orcs are going to lure your players into a false sense of confidence, and before they know it, they're going to be in the middle of a rope bridge, surrounded on both sides by orcs, and their players' characters are going to be wondering what kind of life decisions led them to this terrible point in time. It's brilliant. But it must be said that this dungeon is as cliche as they get. It's a dwarven stronghold overrun by orcs with a powerful monster in the deepest, darkest depths. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, it's exactly like the Mines of Moria, which is a good thing. When I was 4 years old, I watched The Fellowship of the Ring for the first time, and me and my brother would get so excited during the Mines of Moria. We'd jump up on the couches, slaying imaginary orcs in our own imaginary world, and this dungeon captures that perfectly. But I have a couple of tips for you to help make running this dungeon just that much better. First of all, I'm going to show you how to lure your players into this chase scene through role-playing and some poker face on your end. I'm also going to show you how to modernize this dungeon's storytelling, because it is old school and it does just want your players to come here to plunder loot. So we can give it a bit more history and a bit more story to help your players and motivate them. And finally, and most importantly, do not kill your players over one failed dexterity save. I'm going to show you how to alter the rules of the rope bridge. This is my bird's eye view camera view of the dungeon. Let me know how this goes. But we first have to talk very quickly about how to get your players to this dungeon in the first place. The original adventure does give 3 different hooks, but those are really just loot, plunder, loot. They're very gold and treasure focused, which may work for your players, but if you're wanting a bit more of a story reason to come here, I'd actually suggest giving your players a reason to ask the dwarves for some help or a question or for a MacGuffin or something like this, so that your players come here expecting to meet Dugadin the Black, but instead of the dwarves, they instead meet the orcs. And this is going to be a very strange conundrum for your players, because it's like, what happened to this dwarven stronghold that was legendary? And your players are going to slowly discover the tragedy of what happened. You can also have Walkenthorpe gossiping about how they were trading with the dwarves in the 3rd level of the dungeon. However, those dwarves are not the same as the original dwarves that used to live in the stronghold, but the orcs don't know that, and your players are not going to know that. So this first encounter is where you're going to need to lure your players with your poker face, with your role playing, and lure them into this encounter. They're first going to see Walkenthorpe about 30 feet away from them, just around this bend. Walkenthorpe are drinking, they're gossiping, they're doing everything possible to not pay attention and not do their job. So your players are going to be led into this false sense of security with your role playing, and they're going to think that, oh yes, we can just sneak up on these orcs and finish them off with a sneak attack or something like this. However, these orcs have a relatively high armor class and they have 14 HP each. At least one of these orcs are probably going to live. And once that orc lives, you are going to shout, "Intruders!" at the top of your lungs. Okay, like literally stand up and shout, "Intruders!" Okay, let the table know that shit has just gone down and this is going to mean something. But Walkenthorpe, they're going to be running for their lives. They're going to be trying to get to the mountain door to escape to safety, but nobody's going to let them in. But your players are going to chase them down and finish off what they started, finish off those orcs. Meanwhile, you're going to reveal that Walkenthorpe were not the only watchguards on duty. There are also these 3 red goblin archers. Now these archers are actually 15 feet inside the mountain, and they can just see out through a very thin arrow slit. Goblin archers always have full cover, or at least 3/4 cover, so your players aren't really going to be able to fight these goblins back. They're going to be in this chokehold where they're going to be fired at from either side by these goblin archers. And this is really where human psychology is going to come into this encounter, because it's a sunk cost. This encounter tricks your players into believing that the grass is greener just over the next hill, when you as the dungeon master know that this is just a really steep climb and it's only going to get worse. So you need to keep that a secret from your players. Don't let them feel overwhelmed straight away. Just pecker them with some small arrow shots. And this mountain door, it's really just there to slow them down a little bit. How I run it is 3 solid hits with your players' weapons or their spells or their strength checks is going to crumble this door. The original adventure had an armor class and an HP score and stuff like this, but I just say 3 hits and it's gone. Then your players are inside the dungeon proper. Hello again. This is the infamous rope bridge encounter from the Forge of Fury. I had heard about this encounter well before I ran the Forge of Fury, just because of how treacherous and deadly it can be, and it really does live up to the hype. Now I'm going to lay a bunch of special rules onto you about how the rope bridge works and the secret doors and all this stuff. So it might feel overwhelming, but your players are going to be discovering this information slowly over the course of an hour, one at a time. So they're not going to feel too overwhelmed. And once you have a grasp of the encounter, it's not too bad. So just quickly, they had to bust through the iron door over here to get into this room. They had arrows being pelted at them on all sides to do this, so they've just busted through this door and they come into a small platform, and there's a dark abyss below them and a ledge on the other side. And the only way to get across, presumably, is this rope bridge. So, straight away, those players with dark vision, they're going to be able to see some orcs over here on the other side of the bridge. Now, in the original adventure, it really encourages you to roleplay these orcs as taunting, let them pull down their pants, smack their ass, really taunt your players, and then throw some javelins, shoot some short bows, and your players are so sick of getting free attacks on them by ranged attackers that it's going to bait your fighters to cross the rope bridge as fast as possible, because that's the tactical decision. You rush down the artillery, so your fighters are going to be crossing the rope bridge. So the important rules for the rope bridge is that it's difficult terrain. So it's half movement to go across, and it's about 30 to 40 feet across, which means that it's going to take most players about 2 turns to cross the bridge, assuming they don't roll an acrobatics check really bad. So on their turn, they need to succeed on a DC 6 or 8 acrobatics check to even move. Otherwise, the rope bridge is just swaying to and fro too quickly. It's really crudely made, and they just need to keep their balance without moving if they can't make that acrobatics check to even move. Now, in the original adventure, it says that if your players fail this check by 5 or more, then your players just fall to their death in this dark abyss below. I don't recommend that. My players put a lot of love and care into making their player characters. I don't want to just kill them in an anticlimactic way like that. I like to run the game like it's a bit more cinematic. So instead, if they fail the check by a lot or roll a natural one, I would have them hold on for dear life. Just by even just fingernail, they grab on to one of these ropes, and either their friend can help them back up onto the rope bridge, or they can use all of their movement on their next turn to pull themselves back up to a standing neutral position. So this rope bridge, your players are going to be crossing it, learning about the mechanics of this rope bridge, and once they get to about halfway, once 1 or 2 players are at the halfway point of the rope bridge, I want you to up the ante. So if I move the camera again, there are 2 secret doors here on either side of the iron door. So those goblin archers that were shooting the players just before, they're going to bust out of these secret doors, and they're going to flank your party. Now, probably your wizards, sorcerers, spellcasters, ranged attackers are going to be at the back line, and they're going to be flanked suddenly in melee combat out of nowhere, and there's not much they can do about that. So you really ambush the party now. They're in the middle of a rope bridge, surrounded on both sides. The wizards are in melee combat. Your players are going to start panicking. They're finally going to start taking this encounter seriously. So what I've seen most groups do is they try to huddle up. Either the fighters will run back, or the wizards will run onto the rope bridge to get some defense and cover. And your players are going to kill 1 or 2 of these orcs pretty quickly, but what's going to happen is preferably one of the orcs on this side is going to try and cut the rope bridge. So they're going to take their big war axe and send it down onto one of these ropes. And the rope bridge is going to be dangling by only 1 rope on either side. And this is really when this encounter starts to get deadly, because the acrobatics check that your players have to make to even cross this rope bridge, that becomes even harder. It goes up by at least 5. And your players, all of a sudden, they're not defending themselves, they're defending this rope bridge, because half of them are standing on this rope bridge and they're going to plummet down if they don't stop the orcs from cutting it. Now, if 2 ropes are cut, which has happened several times, the rope bridge is going to slam down and become a bit of a ladder on the other side and damage your players when they hit the wall like this. I've had a player go unconscious from that. But yeah, when you start cutting these ropes, I've seen players go into a sort of panic creative mode. I've seen druids turn into snakes and sort of replace the rope, and like in Kung Fu Panda. Or I've seen some rogues try to repair the rope bridge with their 50 feet of hempen rope, in real time. And I've seen barbarians just start hauling their party members, throwing them to the other side, just to try to get everyone through this. And it's really an encounter that brings your party together. They have to work together as one unit to get through this alive. It's so good. It's so good. You have to run this encounter. Regardless, if your party, if the rope bridge is cut or not, they're eventually probably going to get to the other side. I haven't actually had any party members go and explore these secret passages yet, but normally they get to the other side some way, somehow, through thick or thin. They finish off these two orcs, and then there's an easier door to get through down here. And I guess I'll go into a different camera angle to show you the rest of the dungeon, but you don't necessarily need to draw out the rest of the dungeon on a battle map, because a lot of it may be theatre of the mind, depending on the party's choices. And I just want to say, because this is really important, you can't let your players rest, especially in 5th edition. You can't let them rest free. This is a stronghold overrun by orcs. These orcs are going to report back to their master, or even just the sound commotion that has been caused. There's a great little guide in the original adventure that tells you step by step what happens. These orcs are going to be hunting the players down, and whether the players hide or they get a easily defendable position, or maybe they find the witches and make a bargain with the witches, your players cannot rest. You need to hunt them down with ruthlessness that the orcs would have for having their home invaded. In the rest of the dungeon, there are 2 traps that the players may find, then they maybe even be able to use it to their advantage. The first of these is a poison gas trap, which is activated through a pressure plate. The second is a fire-breathing dwarven head trap that is sort of like a jack-in-the-box. It's activated when one of the players open a door. I would recommend not being coy about the information on how these traps are used and what they are, so that the players can use them to their advantage, because otherwise it's unlikely that your players will step on them themselves. They're sort of out of the way. I've had a lot of players use the fire-breathing trap to incinerate some of the sturges, for example. The first lot of NPCs that the players are probably going to meet are the prisoners. In the original adventure, these are just poor peasants that were unsuccessfully held for ransom, and they're probably going to end up as the orcs' dinner at this point. And in my experience, players are unwilling to help these prisoners after they've been so close to death after the rope bridge. So my recommendation is to actually give these prisoners a way to help your players, and that way the players can return the favor. The easiest way of doing this is just giving the players a health potion, but otherwise the prisoners could tell of Ulf's cruelty and how he has these supernatural regeneration abilities. The witches are hidden away at the corner of the map behind a secret door, performing some sort of dark magic ritual, and they otherwise don't do much in the original adventure. However, your players may be able to bargain safe passage with these witches, as they do have a passageway to the Glitterheim. However, the players are probably going to be very low on HP after the rope bridge and trying to hide from the rest of the orcs, so one sleep spell from any of these witches is going to knock out the entire party. So the players are going to be on the low ground, and they're probably going to have to kowtow to the witches' demands. I would suggest the witches asking or making the players go and collect a potion ingredient for them, so that the witches can brew a potion of polymorph or something like this. And of course your players are going to go down into the dungeon, level up, rest, come back stronger, and then just steal that potion straight from the witches. The final NPC that your players are going to meet in this level of the dungeon is They're the orc chieftain Ulf. Now, aside from having some exceedingly handsome locks, he's really just a big mean orc in the original adventure. I would suggest upgrading him to become a troll, which would give him these supernatural regeneration abilities, which you can foreshadow beforehand. And this would turn Ulf into more of a funny character, living a life of pretend as an orc when he's really a troll. And this would also give your players an avenue to expose Ulf, to have his orc minions turn against him when the orcs realize that he's not actually one of them. Okay, so that just about does it for the first level of the Forge of Fury. I'm currently working on an adventure overview of the Lost Caverns of Sokan, the 5th edition remake of that dungeon. So if you're interested in that, definitely consider subscribing to the channel. It's my first video, so any comments, likes, subscriptions really helps a lot. But otherwise, this is D&D with ET signing off. Thanks for watching.